which really were very, very helpful. And it took a lot of thought and time and patience because you don't have instant gratification in a situation like this. So I just worked and worked and worked and kept doing it every day. And then we started seeing a little bit of improvement.
Stan, I wonder how that impacted you.
I experienced her discouragement. And so I had to encourage her to let's find out what we can do about it, you know. And so that's when she came to you, Dr. Ford, to find out what the problem was.
Tess worked hard, and she came back for a repeat visit in several months. Unlike a lot of my patients, her vocal cord nodules did resolve. Now this took her from a voice that was extremely harsh and almost without any tone in it to a much better singing voice. A much better speaking voice. And Melissa really did wonders with her in that. But her goal was not just to speak well. Her goal was to sing again. And Tess, what is the role that singing plays in your life?
Well, I've sung ever since I could speak. And Mother trained me that the Lord gave me my voice, and so it was my responsibility to love Him and give it back. And so I trained. She taught me little songs, and I grew up singing for the Lord. And when this happened to me, I was so disappointed because I spent my whole career singing and teaching others to sing. Never had a nodule in my life, and I was so upset to think that at this stage of the game, age 71, that I would be having nodules and not being able to speak or sing. So when I came to you, I was so upset about that, and I just told you that if the Lord wanted me to sing again, that He would make it possible. And He gave me you as my doctor, and Dr. Porterfield and Melissa, and this team has been the most wonderful team because we've all been able to work toward the same goal, and that is to get me singing again for the Lord.
I think you can see the impact that singing has had in Tessa's life. If you're surprised, like I was, to find out that she's 71, I didn't include that, but the aging process only adds one more obstacle to the pathway of rehabilitation. Because she had this great desire to sing again, in order to achieve that goal, beyond the work that she would do with a speech-language pathologist such as Melissa, my recommendation to her was to find someone who could coach her and instruct her in the proper use of her singing voice. Now, she has been singing for probably more than 60 or 70 years by the time I saw, well, more than 60 years by the time I saw her. And she was well-trained. But even well-trained people need additional instruction. And so I referred her to a voice professor. And at this point, I'd really like to hear what Dr. Porterfield experienced with Tess and what her thoughts were on her treatment.
Thank you. Tess called me on the telephone and explained a little bit about her situation. And I said that I had experience working with singers who were recovering from vocal distress and would welcome working with her. And from the very beginning, we had a head start, I think, because Tess's work with Dr. Ford left her with the knowledge that this entire recuperation process was exactly that. It was a process, and in fact, we made an appointment for the first lesson, I think it was maybe 3 months ahead of time, Tess
Yes.
called and she said, right now I am working with Melissa, but I'm calling you to tell you that at the end of the fall, I should be ready to meet with you, and I would like to bring Melissa with me. And so I want to make the point that, again, this team approach was utilized with great industry and patience on behalf of Tess and Stan. And our first 2 lessons, I believe, were
Yes.
with Melissa.
Yes.
And the 3 of us worked together, and what that was able to do for me was to give me a big picture of the kind of work that Tess had been doing with Melissa. This was very important because I intended to start my work with Tess not by singing, but just by phonating. And so we moved from Melissa's work with Tess on speech work into the vocal gesture is what I call it. And perhaps this might be a good place for a little demonstration. We
Good.
began slowly, and we began with not singing, but just the vocal gesture. Tess, perhaps you could simply hum. This is sustained phonation, and this was the link that I used between Melissa and singing. And so what we did was we enjoyed the freedom of no timetable, no schedule, and no prescribed exercises, which is very different, I might add, than the beginning teaching of voice to someone with a healthy voice. And I made that point to Tess from the beginning, that I wished for her to value experimentation and play and flexibility within these vocal gestures that I wrote down several things that she could do. We also used, eventually we used small sentences, and usually they had humor to them because I also wanted Tess to continue to find joy in the singing process. Tess is naturally an optimistic, energetic, joyful lady, and being a singer myself, I know that when people pursue singing, it is because they enjoy it. And so we used funny sentences such as the old rhyme, Fuzzy Wuzzy was a bear, and sang. Perhaps you could sing the vocal gesture of Fuzzy Wuzzy.
Fuzzy Wuzzy was a bear.
And we used different sentences to begin to help Tess sing, and we used sentences that employed different consonants and different vowels. And then we turned from different types of consonants and vowels. We started working more from a singing vocal aspect, and eventually brought her to the point where she was singing almost on a daily basis. And then we also eventually I began to invite her to things with my other students. And the day was a glorious one when we decided together, and with Melissa's approval, that she was ready to sing literature.
Yes, that was a glorious day. And I learned a first little song was called The Mermaid, and it was such a sweet little song and very lilting and interestingly high, and I enjoyed that very much. Melissa had been working with me to help me speak in a low tone because it's much more restful and less stressful on the voice. And this song was